Hello, this is Dan Humberg, and I'm going to help you with a video to show how to prepare the tin for the installation on a Case IH combine. In this case, the tin set is for a Firestop kit on a model 8250, particularly the model year 2022, or perhaps later than that, but it started in 2022. What you're looking at is the computer model or the CAD model of the pieces of the tin that we've designed to fit around the hot exhaust components on this model combine. I'm going to step through the pieces with you here and show it in the situation where it's all assembled in the computer, and then I'll show you separately on the bench how to fold up each piece of tin so that you can assemble it into this same configuration. Then you're going to take it back apart and you're going to put it together on the combine around the engine components. But it's a good idea to look at this ahead of time to get a sense as for how the pieces go together and what you're looking at when you're putting it on the combine. So we're looking at the assembled tin set. I can rotate it around here so that we can look at it. If we swing it around to the back side, you see that there's a gap here, and I run the cursor around this. That's actually where it's going to face up against the enclosure that Case has now built around the exhaust manifold. And so they have a stainless steel box around the exhaust manifold, but not the turbocharger or the other hot components. And so this tin set or this kit, this enclosure, will bolt onto that enclosure that Case has on the machine. In fact, these larger holes that you see across the back here and across the bottom here are the ones that are going to utilize the bolts that hold the front part of their cover on. So we'll take some of their bolts off and use them to attach both this and their front cover back on again. So let's just look at the individual pieces. I'm going to try to go through them in the order that you would put them on the combine, just to hopefully make sense of it, and just to look at each individual piece and how it's shaped. In the case when I did the test install or the prototype install of this set of tin on that model combine, this was the piece that I started with here. I forget what the number of the piece is. It's not number one. Number one is up here, but this piece is the one that I used as a starting point. It's going to slip underneath the turbocharger. If we look here, looking at it from this direction, on the engine, the exhaust turbine is right inside here. We're going to bring our air in right on top of it through this hole and dump that air onto the exhaust turbine. The exhaust turbine is here inside the enclosure. Right next to it here is the compressor turbine on your so you got the exhaust part here where it's extracting power, and the compressor turbine here where it's compressing fresh air. And we're going to split those two apart with this box. So the first piece, this piece here, is going to go below and behind the turbocharger. You'll actually be sitting in the combine when you do the install about where I'm at here looking at the kit, and you'll slide that piece up underneath until it wraps around the pressure line that serves the turbocharger oil bearing. And then we'll use this hole here with one of those small stainless steel bolts that Case has on their enclosure to hold it in place temporarily, or hold it in place. We'll use that bolt eventually, but we'll have other things that will attach it here as well. So that will bolt on. So that's the first piece I would install. The second piece that I worked with on the kit is this little blue one here. Again, they'll all be galvanized metal when you get them, so they all look the same color, but this one, it'll have this shape after we get it folded up. It's got flanges around the edge here. You can see in the model when I run around it here, it's got flanges that fold over so that we can attach it to the neighboring pieces. That piece will come up from underneath. Sorry, get this where you can see it too. That piece will come up from underneath here, underneath the turbocharger, and overlap. It looks to me like it sits inside or on the compressor side of the exhaust turbine side, excuse me, of this piece of tin here. That'll be the next one, and it will attach. Hopefully, I think what I could do is reach around behind and get at least one screw, maybe two, but at least one screw through here from underneath to hold this blue one onto the gray one. So that's the second piece. The next piece probably would be this one on top up here. This one has flanges that bend around this way, one on top up here, and a flange on this side that bends over about 45 degrees. That one slips down from above over the turbocharger bearing. That's what that big hole is for. Slips on the outside of the blue piece, and then you'll run a screw through from right to left into, I think it's this hole right here. It's the only one that'll actually work. You have to run the screw through from the right, and it should nest inside the compressor turbine there. This one out here you probably can't use because it'll run into the compressor turbine. I didn't know that when I designed it, but I found that out when I put it on the machine. So that's the next piece. After that one, I believe we're going to put this little light blue one in here. That will slip underneath. It goes inside of or sits on top of. You can see it in through here. It sits, nests down on top of this first piece that we put in, and you should be able to reach underneath and get screws through from the back side here in there to get it attached. Initially attached, then we'll put more screws on later. You may be able to get screws in here. I don't know for sure whether you'll be able to reach those from the back or not. It's a real tight space back there, but you may be able to get one, at least one of those holes, maybe both of them. So that piece will slip in place. After that one, I think probably the next one I did was this one. This piece has flanges that are bent up and around here. It's kind of has a kind of a box shape, and by the time we fold it up, it'll slip up from underneath and screw onto the bottom of this dark blue piece and the ones in the back that we've already put in place, so you can get screws underneath and put those up in there. Not sure which one I did next, but I believe this piece could probably go in place next. That one slips down behind the exhaust pipe, and there's this thing that I call a choke inside here that restricts the exhaust to heat it up quickly when you start the engine so that it doesn't produce black smoke. That piece will slip down from above. It'll be kind of a tight fit, but it'll slip down from above and wrap down and underneath that exhaust pipe system. This one has a couple little tabs here, and you may need to fold those tabs down and back here in order to be able to get it in place, because there's a little actuator arm that goes up through this hole. We're going to look at it from the bottom here. Here we're looking up from the bottom of the enclosure. And there's this actuator arm that has to run up and down through there to control that choke position. So you fold these gates down and open to slip it in place, and then you fold them back up to fill in the space behind that actuator arm. It'll run up through here, and it doesn't actually take that much space, but I had to open it up to make sure we didn't get contact there. But you don't want to dump a whole lot of air out that hole, so we want to fold those back up once we get it in place to close off the space between the actuator arm and the next piece underneath here, or the part of your choke underneath there, so we don't dump any more air out there than we need to. Once that piece is in place, you should be able to attach it. We got screws here and here from the back that you'd reach up underneath or reach around from behind to put in with a little stubby screwdriver. And these two are meant to try to go in from this direction. Now obviously some of this stuff isn't here yet. Maybe we can peek through here. If we look through this hole, you can see those holes there are ones that are meant to be able to put a screw from this side that way. And if you can reach those here, they will also help tie this piece on. Come on, let's get back here where you can see. Also, once you have this piece in place here, we've got 1, 2, 3 bolts, actually 4 bolts. This one here is used both by this piece and this one. Both those pieces will overlap this bolt hole and it will go in and hold them on. Again, those are bolts that are in place on the case stainless steel enclosure, and so these 4, we can take those bolts off of their enclosure, put our piece in place, and then put those bolts back in to hold it on in place there. This one over here is kind of hard to reach, but you'll be able to get it done eventually. You're going to do it from out this direction. Once you have that one in place, this one here will flip around. And at that point, I think we could probably put this piece in place. This one here, it's what I'd call kind of the bottom tray. It's a pretty flat piece, but it'll slide in from this direction that way. It has to fit around a bracket, a support bracket here, and that may be a little tight fit, but it'll slide in place there. Notice it sits above or on top of the piece that we just put in back here on the back. So you have to slip it in and make sure it goes over the top of that piece. Then you can get underneath it with screws here and here and here and here that will go up from underneath and hold it in place together. Once we have that one done, we should be able to slip this end piece in place. It now slips inside of these others that we've put on, so it kind of sits down in on top of them. You can reach behind and get a screw in over here, here, and these ones from underneath down near the end. There will be way over to the right-hand end when you're working in the hole. You may have to bend down and go underneath there, but you can screw that in place. We have nothing to screw to up here just yet because we'll put this piece in place probably next. Maybe we could even do that one before the end piece. This one, this long one, I think it's piece number 1, will go in place across. You can't really see it from here. Otherwise, I'd show it from this side. But it will go on against that stainless steel enclosure on the top side of it. And you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 larger holes here. Those holes are to match up with the bolt holes on the case system. So those would be those little stainless steel bolts. This one we used early in the process to hold a piece on here, I think. No, I take it back, it was this one. So now we can slip this one, this blue piece up here. You have to actually slip him in behind the end piece that we put on up here earlier, and then you could put in 1, 2, 3, 4 of those bolts that we took off of the case system. With that piece in place, you may be able to reach around the end here and put a screw to tie this one to the end as well. Once we have that much done, we can come around to the front here and probably put this piece on, this blue one. This one has flanges on this side that has a little tapered one down here and then a long one up here. They'll bend away from this outside face. And then up at the top, we've got one that doesn't have any holes in it. It will go up against the can of your diesel oxidation catalyst. And it is pretty easy to put this one up in there, and you've got screw holes across the bottom up this side that you can attach it with. I think after that one, I would probably put this piece in place. This gray one here, it's a complicated affair. It's got lots of bends in it. You can see it when I light it up there. It goes underneath, and it has these flanges that wrap around here in this triangular face. That'll slip in place kind of from underneath and from outside here up against the others that we have in place, and you can put screws through on the bottom. Actually, it looks like, notice it sits on top of this one that we've already got in place here, so it'll slip in above that and on top of this one that we've put in place before, or underneath it, and you can put screws through here and then put screws through here to hold this all together. With that one in place, we can do this lighter gray one here. He's got a little flange at the bottom with 3 holes and then a series up the side that match up with the one on the blue piece here, and so we can slip that in place there and put screws in both here and up here to put it together. After that one, I would probably put this one in place. He attaches all around here. He's got lots of screws that tie him onto multiple different parts. 2 flanges on the edge here and here. With that one in place, you can do this corner. And the corner, he'll slip underneath here where this flange overlaps. That little flange overlaps underneath there. It goes overlaps one of the earliest pieces we put on and screw on there. But it should lay in place there. You'll also have to figure out how to snake it around this wastegate actuator that runs up through here, but it shouldn't be too hard to do that now that we've broken it into 2 pieces. When I first designed it, it was a single piece and it was impossible to get it on there. Now we have a piece that can slide down like this, and then this one here that I can highlight will slip down in to fill the gap behind it, kind of in here. So put this one in place, screw it down there and up here and up here and up here. We don't have a top to put on here yet, but we can, everything else you can attach. Then this dark blue one that's highlighted there will slide down in place. It should go, shows it underneath this one to the left, and that's fine. If it'll go in there, that's great. Underneath that tab, on top of this one, underneath this one, you got 1, 2, 3, possibly 4 screws to hold that in place. Get that done. And we have the top deck here, this, whatever we call that, gold, sorry. Here, this gold piece. That'll just lay on top here. You will have to fit it around. These cutouts are for the sensors that are in the exhaust system to come out of. There's a sensor line and a bracket that holds it. Similarly down here, there's a sensor that comes out here. You may find that you have to cut the tin out if that sensor is moved on your combine at all, or if I don't have them perfectly in the right spot, you may have to cut a little bit around there to make sure that they fit freely through there. What you don't want to have is metal contact up against those sensor lines, because you don't want to vibrate against them and cut them. So make sure they have a little bit of clearance, and then you can fill in with that aluminum foil tape around them to tighten it up and to immobilize that sensor line as it comes through there so that it can't vibrate or be cut through by this tin. Once we have this one in place on top, you can screw it onto the side here as well as all the way around on the top. I think that only leaves one more piece. Get over here. That's this one in here. I'm looking down on top of it here. I can also swing it around to see it from the back. There. It'll lay in place on top of the top piece here, and then up against these flanges on the back side here, and it'll just screw in place there. This one also has a flange without holes, and your diesel oxidation catalyst, that big stainless steel, looks like a muffler up here, will fit right in here in a big circle and fill in that space. You might have to trim around that can, these fingers. They're cut like this so that you can bend them out, or on the far side you may have to bend them in instead. If you bend them so that they fit snug up against that diesel oxidation catalyst, then we don't have to cut them, and that's better. but you want to be able to have, it'd be nice to have contact against that so it can't get a lot of air and dust in around that hot stuff. So push them up against the can, or just bend them out enough so when you put this piece in place, it springs up against that can and prevents dust from getting in here. If we're pushing enough air in here, then we'll have air coming out around this, but we want it to tighten, be as tight as we possibly can. So that's why these are cut with fingers, so that you can bend them out towards us a little ways here, and the far ones may actually have to bend in because there's a thing outside there that may prevent you from bending them outward. But if you bend them in, they'll also flex up against that can so that they kind of seal up against it, but don't keep you from pushing the piece in place. Okay, I know I've taken longer than I should have with this, but that's the assembled tin set for an 8250 2022 model year, where the case added the box around their exhaust manifold. So this is how it'll assemble on the bench. I will tell you in that assembly, but I'm going to tell you here too, when you assemble this on the bench, just like this, and you can use this video to do that assembly if you'd like as well, put a screw in all of these holes, particularly the ones on the bottom, the inside, in here, and the ones in the back, so that when you get on the machine and you're putting this part in place and you have to reach around your blind underneath in a place where it's really difficult to reach and you're holding a little tiny stubby driver with a screw on the end of it, if you can get it into the hole is pre-threaded, so it'll run in easily rather than having to try to screw that in against and bite into the metal the first time. So that's why you want to at least run a screw in and out of all these holes on the bench before you get on the combine itself to do the install. Okay, that's the CAD model from the tin set for an 8250 Model 22 year. Now we'll go on to the bench where I'll show you how I assemble the tin. I will point out in that video a couple of things. First, I bend the flanges in a couple of them in the wrong direction. So watch the text on the video, because rather than reshoot the whole thing, I put some text in there to tell you I'm bending this in the wrong direction. Also, what was I going to say? Also, in that video, this was one part. This one and that one were one single part. It's easy to assemble it on the bench. It's impossible to put it in place on the combine. So in this design, I've got a piece here and a piece there that attach to each other, but you can slip them around that wastegate actuator to make it work. I don't show that in the assembly video, or the tin prep video on the bench, because I didn't have those two as two different parts, but you can see them here. This piece doesn't actually require any bends anyway, but then the other one's going to have the same bends it had before. But it is two separate pieces rather than one as in shown in that video. Okay, and watch for the text in that video where I screw up and bend some parts the wrong way. I'll try to either edit the video to show that or highlight it with text to tell you when I'm doing something wrong, so you don't do it wrong. All right, we'll get on to that piece next.
Hello, my name is Dan Humberg. I represent HarvestFires.com, and if you're watching this, you're probably either considering or facing the possibility of installing a combine kit to prevent fires on your combine when you're harvesting a volatile crop like sunflowers or canola. This video is an instructional video on how to prepare the tin set. This is a tin set that creates an enclosure around the exhaust components on the engine. This video is for a case model 8250 combine, particularly the 2022 model year. Case changed the exhaust system a little bit in 2022. They actually put a stainless steel box around the exhaust manifold, but they haven't enclosed the turbocharger or the choke after that, and so we still have a kit for that combine, but it's different than the 21 and earlier model years for the 8250. The kit I'm going to prepare and show you here is actually the prototype set for that. It's the first one I've done for the 2022 model year. And so I'm folding it up for the first time as well, but I'm assuming that the kit will fit or a version so similar to this that you wouldn't know the difference will fit when you get your kit. And so what this video is going to show you is how to prepare that tin, how to bend the flanges so that the pieces will fit together in a puzzle that will enclose the turbocharger and the choke and everything up to the diesel oxidation catalyst on your 8250. Before we begin, I think I'll talk just a minute about tools and the setup. You're looking at a part of a bench here where I do the work, do my tin prep. We've got flanges to bend on 24 gauge galvanized material that represents this enclosure. The pieces have been cut with a laser, and any place that we're going to make a bend a flange for instance, we typically have a dotted line, a perforated dotted line cut on that bend line so that it will preferentially bend there. It'll want to bend at that location as opposed to somewhere else. And so many of these you can actually do with your hands, but it's also helpful to have some other tools. From now on, I'll probably have you look down at the bench and I'll show you some of the things before we get started with the tin. Okay, I have several tools for bending tin. This one is a flat, it's a sheet metal tool, about 6 inches wide. That's a Harbor Freight purchase. If you have a Harbor Freight so close by and you want one, they're not very expensive. This is a vice grip sheet metal tool. You can probably buy it at Runnings or another hardware store. It's a useful tool for smaller flanges. I also have a sheet metal tool that I bought off of Amazon. This is a good one. You can slide the sheet metal into this slot. This one will bend like a 1-inch flange so that you can grip the whole flange and bend it over. The backside one has a slot for about a 3/8 or 1/2-inch flange. I will typically, with your kit, I'll send you a piece of one of these or a version, one like it, that's about 5 or 6 inches long here. Most of your flanges are smaller, and so that tool would help you to make some of those bends if you need to. But you can buy one of these if you want to as well. They're not terribly expensive. I may also do the assembly of this set of tin on the bench. If so, I've got a whole bunch of square drive. These are self-drilling, self-tapping, square drive sheet metal screws. They're the only thing I would use on this because when you're in the combine in a tight space, you can put one of these on the end of a square drive screwdriver and it'll stay on there so that you can reach where you need to reach and put it in place. Most of the holes on the pieces of tin, just a minute, I'll grab a piece of tin. Most of the holes for the screws have actually been cut by the laser, and if we've done it right, that they will line up with the corresponding holes on the piece that mates to it. And so these sheet metal screws go in really easily that way. My recommendation, though, is that you assemble the tin on the bench using these screws so that you at least run a screw in and out of each hole. Whether you leave it in there to assemble the whole thing doesn't matter so much, but you want the holes to kind of be pre-threaded when you get on the combine. There are some where it's very difficult to reach, and so you're reaching into a really awkward place, and you want that screw hole to be pre-threaded so that you don't have to exert a lot of force to make it bite into the steel and do that in place on the combine. It'll just make it easier then. I have a 6-inch driver. I'll send you one of these with a kit if you buy one. I have short drivers. I'll send one of those. I have a stubby driver for those ones that's really hard to reach that I make and send with the kit so that you can do this in the palm of your hand if you need to. And sometimes, and I usually send a long one, a real long one, about 10 or 11 or 12 inches long as well, in case you need to reach some places that are very difficult to get at with a shorter driver. So those are the screws we put it together with. One more thing is, if you don't have that sheet metal tool and you have a long bend to make, for instance, some of these kits have a bend on the top of the manifold that's maybe 35 inches long, a flange to bend. I do that frequently with just a piece of strap. This is I think it's 3/16 thick, 1.5 inch wide strap and a piece of angle iron, and I just have a bolt on each end that's loosely set in there and enough space in between to slip the longest piece of tin that I would use in between these two, and then I set it in a vise, clamp it, and I can bend that piece of sheet metal over this angle iron. It just makes for a cleaner bend than trying to do it in small pieces where it'll bend cleaner if you do it with this thing. Most of you have this stuff in the rack probably to make something like that. You don't have to for just 1 or 2 bends, but if you're going to put more than one of these combine kits on, you might want to have something like this available. It just makes life a little easier. Okay, I think we'll start. This kit is for a case 8250, but the model 2022 year. I hope they leave it alone so that it also fits 2023 and 2024, but you never know. They change these things pretty frequently. So this is the first piece. It's marked on mine with a Sharpie. The guys that cut it marked it C85001 for the part number. When you receive it, I will probably have added cut-through part numbers somewhere on here, so that I can't tell you where it will occur on the piece, but it will probably say C85 and then probably just the number 1 with an underscore underneath it so that you can identify that part. This part has a single dotted line, so it has a single bend. The flange is long enough, but I don't know that I can fit it. I could try it in this tool. So you can put it in like that. We could try and bend it with that and see what happens. Yeah, that's probably not, it starts. Yeah, there she's going to go. But it doesn't want to bend this little short piece in here where I can't get a grip on it with this thing. So I'm going to stick this one in that angle iron arrangement I talked about, and I'll come back in just a minute with that one done. Okay, I'm back. I bent that piece. If I don't tell you otherwise, you might consider that the bend is going to be a 90-degree bend. Some of them are not 90 degrees, and I'll try and tell you when they're not. And you can, like I overbent this one a little bit, but it's pretty easy to unbend it. So looking at this part, I've got a cutout here. This is going to go around the back of where the turbo mounts to the manifold. And then it's got a single bend where we bend that over this way towards me, 90 degrees. Okay, part 1. That one's all ready to go. This is part number 2, C852. It's kind of a triangular part. I have to look at my own drawing to figure out which way to bend the flanges on this one because I haven't done this set before. So it's got 3 flanges on it. If you're looking at the piece like this, you're looking down on it. You got the angles as you see them here, a little knockout here and a big cutout here. We're going to bend all 3 flanges 90 degrees away from us. If you bend them the wrong way, you'll find out when you try to assemble the tin that you bent something wrong because it won't match up. But if you bend them the wrong way, you can bend them back the other way. It'll allow you to make the mistake 2 or 3 times before it would break on that line, but it will fatigue it like anything else if you bend it back and forth too many times. So I'm going to use this tool, bend that 90 degrees down. That one. I can actually finish these by hand. There we go. And if you don't get the bends perfect here, when you get on the combine, you can adjust them a little bit when you're doing the assembly. But that's part number 2. We're looking at this triangular face, however it looks to you. But from that configuration, all 3 flanges bend 90 degrees down away from you. Part number 3 is the mating part to that. It's actually going to go around the turbo bearing between the turbocharger exhaust turbine and the compressor turbine. Looking at it like this, I've got that cutout for the turbo bearing. This is where the oil line underneath, the return oil line, is going to be. All of the flanges along here, along here, and along here all bend down away from this face. I can do them by hand like that. I can also do them with this thing. we go. You can adjust them as necessary. 90 degrees down away from this face. Make sure you got it oriented that way and 90 degrees away from you. Part number 3. Part number 4 kind of goes down and underneath behind the turbocharger. It has 2 bends in it. Again, looking like in the orientation that we have it here, we've got 2 bends to make. These are not 90 degree bends, they're about 45s. Let's see, I can do that one with this tool. And if you don't get these exactly right, don't worry about it. You can adjust them when you do the assembly and you find out how it matches up to it. There'll be a part that fits against it, so it'll tell you the angle then. But about 45 degrees, again, I'm doing 45 degrees down from this orientation. However it works for you. If you'd rather look at it this way, it's 45 degrees up on each one of them. This opening here is going to go around the pressure line that brings the oil to the turbo bearing. It comes up, it's a hard line that will come up through here, go over to the top of the turbo bearing. Part number 4, ready to assemble. Part number 5, C8250, or 5, has a little finger here with a rather large hole in it, and then a tab that goes down here, and we've got 2 bends to make. These are going to be the same angles as the previous one, about 45 degrees. So roughly 45 degrees down on this flange with that larger hole in it, and about 45 degrees with this one. C85005, part number 5, ready to go. This is part number 6, C85006. It has 1, 2, 3, 4 actual bends in it. It has a cutout of the daisy pedal thing here that will slip around the, in this case I think it's the oil return line, the diesel or the turbocharger return line from underneath the bearing. Looking at the part from this orientation, we're going to bend this flange down away from me 90 degrees. We're going to bend, we've got 2 flanges here adjacent to each other. I'm going to bend the inner part down away from me 90 degrees, and then I'm going to bring this flange along with this tail here back up parallel to the initial face 90 degrees. So we've got an L-shaped bend in it now, down and back out like that. And then this little tab on the end here, you can bend about 45 degrees up like that. So we have starting to create a box for the bottom of the turbocharger is what we're doing. There you go, part number 6. Looking at this space with the oil cutout here, this flange down, this one back parallel to the initial face, and this one down away 45 degrees. All right, this is part number 7. Doesn't that look like fun? We have a complicated piece here with a number of bends to make in it. Looking at it in this orientation, where this is my left, it'd probably be your right. This triangular piece off here has bends here, 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 and here, and then 2 down here and 2 up at this end here as well. So looking at it in this orientation, we can start by bending this simple flange on the end 90 degrees down. The next thing we're going to do is take everything outside of this line, that whole triangular mess with all of this, we're going to bend the whole works up towards this 90 degrees. And I did that just by pushing it down on the bench. I've got a little bit of cleanup I could do here. You can do some of that with a simple pliers as well. So we bend that up 90 degrees. Once in a while, I don't have a hammer here, but you can square things up sometimes with a hammer if it didn't want to bend the little tail flat. So there we go. That up. The next thing is going to be to bend the rest of this. I got a 3/4 inch flange here. They're going to bend the rest of this triangular piece back down parallel with the initial face. I can do that by hand. So like that other one, I've got an L-shaped bend now here, where we bent it out and then back over this way. This little tab here, let's wait. We can bend that one down. I don't know if I can get a hold of it to bend it down. There we go. And it'll go 90 degrees. Like that. And then this tab here, this little one with the point on the end of it, will bend down just to parallel this, so that a piece of sheet metal is going to cover over those two and match up to both of them. So they're laying in the same plane here. That leaves two more. This first one on this line right here, we're going to bend down, but not very far. That's actually going to pick up the same plane as this one, because a piece of sheet metal is going to cover up all of that, or match up to it. The rest of this, we bend to the rest of it 90 degrees, not 90 degrees, but enough so that it's 90 degrees to the main face here. And again, you can adjust them when you're doing the assembly of the tin, but that's what it'll look like. Much of this lies in the same plane. This face, this face, this face, all lie in a plane here. The rest of it is kind of, we call it orthogonal, but 90 degrees to this one. That's it. Part number 7. Just make sure you have it oriented the right way when you start, and you'll end up with the right configuration at the end. Part number 7. This is part number 8. C825008. It has two bends to make in it. They're along the same line, even though they look like separate pieces. It's just two bends to make. These are both about 45-degree bends. So looking at it like this, I'm going to bend this large face here up towards me about 45 degrees. I'm just going to do that by pushing it down on the bench in front of me. Yeah, roughly 45 degrees. We can adjust it later if that's not right. And then we're going to do the same thing with that small flange, although that might be easier done with this tool, or you can do it with the angle iron or whatever, or push it on the bench. I'm just going to bend it up about 45 degrees so that the total of the two bends is 90 degrees. That's what we're looking for. So part number 8, big face, bent up 45 degrees, and the small one bent up 45 degrees, and you got something that looks like that. All right, piece number 9. I've got a slot with a hole through it here, and it shows two bends here, or two dotted lines. This one, this little one with the two holes in it, don't bother to bend that at all. I don't know if it was a mistake or if I think, never mind, there's a part of the design process that leaves that dotted line there, but don't bend that one at all. This one, we're going to get, it's not going to be quite 90 degrees, but it'll be most of 90 degrees. Not quite 90 degrees, but something like there, maybe about 10 degrees short of 90. It'll match up with one of those other pieces where we made a shallow bend on. So, and leave that one alone. So single bend on part number 9. Looking at this face with this notch and this, like in those orientations, this flange bends up about 80 degrees. All right, we're looking at part number 10, and the guys that cut the laser cutter guys taped that flange on, which I believe was right there, which means that I put a solid line there instead of a dotted line, so the laser cut it right off. I'll have to fix that. From your standpoint, that flange will be there on your piece, I hope, and that will bend down 90 degrees away from us, I think. Okay, let's correct that. That flange will bend down 90 degrees this way. So let's look at the piece oriented like this, with this arc here, and then this on my right, your left. This flange should be there as with a dotted line. We'll bend it down 90 degrees. We'll bend the long one on this side down 90 degrees. In fact, all of these get bent down 90 degrees. So looking at that piece, we should have 1, 2, 3, 4 flanges bent down 90 degrees. Don't worry about this now. We'll bend it when we're on the combine, when we're putting it together. Part number 10. Part number 11. 11 is going to have 3 bends in it. It's got 3 flanges. I'm looking at it like this, with this notch on my left to be your right, probably. I'm going to bend all 3 flanges. This one is not going to be 90 degrees. He's going to go under or down probably about 75 or 80 degrees, more like that, and we'll adjust it later. The other 2 bends are 90 degrees, and they're lined up. I can catch them both with one action here. There we go. That down 90, this down about, 75 or 80 degrees. Part number 11. Okay. This is part number 12. And there's a cut that didn't get completed here. There should be a line across here from all the way from this little notch all the way across the top of this to the top of that dotted line. The laser somehow or the computer missed that. I'll have to correct it in the production version. But I'm just going to cut across there with a tin snips. Okay, so yours should have this cut through there, just like I did. And now we have several bends to make. This line, everything here along this one will bend up 90. I'm going to do that in 2 parts. That little flange that way, and the rest of it I should be able to do by pushing it down on the bench. Okay, so we have a wall there, and that was a 90-degree bend. And this one I'm going to bend under. Now down away from the face, 90 degrees. I'm not sure if that's a 90-degree bend. I think it ends up being that. And then this one on this face underneath here gets bent down 90 degrees. Part number 13 has 2 bends in it. We're looking at the face. I'm looking at, I guess it could be either of 2 ways. I'm not sure that it's symmetrical. I'm looking at it with this zigzag, these down here like this. So looking at it with this one in this corner, I'm going to bend along this line. I'm going to bend everything, that side of it up, not quite 90 degrees. About like that. We'll adjust it later if necessary. This small flange doesn't have any holes in it. We're going to bend that out a little bit, and we'll adjust that on the combine. It's going to fit up against your diesel oxidation catalyst. So we got 2 bends to make. With this one down in that corner, I'm going to bend the center part up about 75 degrees, and then this one up or out just a little bit. Part number 13. Part number 14 doesn't appear to have any bends in it. Not sure where it goes. It'll show up somewhere in the assembly, but part number 14, no bends. Part number 15 is an odd-shaped piece. Let's get it so that you're looking at like this. So that that cut is coming up like this, and this one's branching off in that direction. And now we're going to, holding it like that, I'm going to take this flange that has the partial circular cutout in it here, and I'm going to bend that down, but not 90 degrees. It's more like probably about 45 degrees. Again, we can adjust it when we match up to the other parts. About 45 degrees on that one. Similarly, about 45 degrees down on this other one here. So, like that. So we got this Y or whatever in here, oriented like this, and then we bend this face down about 45 and this flange down about 45. There's a little tiny one here too that we can bend with pliers or whatever. It's not a big deal. It probably just plugs up a little hole. Part number 15. 16, this is the last piece. This is the top deck, I would call it. It's where we're going to bring our, this is where we'll bring our clean air supply into the enclosure. It has 3 bends to make. This longer flange bends up from this, you know, get it oriented however it looks to you, like this. And in that orientation, this flange is going to come up 90 degrees. These 2 little tabs are going to go down 90 degrees. Overdid them a little bit. There we go. Okay, that's the last piece. That's part number 16. So if we've done it correctly, we've bent all of the flanges so that now we can assemble our enclosure into the shape that it'll go onto the combine. By doing that, assembling it now, we have 2 benefits from that. One is that we pre-thread all those holes so that the screws go in easy when you're on the combine. And second, you get to see how the pieces are oriented to each other as you assemble it, and that makes it easier to reorient them that way when you put them on the combine and not have to guess quite so much as to how in the world this piece fits with the other ones. Alright, as I go to start putting pieces together, I've already found that I made one mistake. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mistakes, I guess, but all on one piece. This is part number 3. Go way back to part number 3. Hopefully I'll slip this bit of video in place of the other one so that you don't make that error. But this is part number 3, and I bent all of the flanges in the opposite direction of the direction they need to go. So I'm going to reverse every one of them carefully so that I don't make those corners brittle and have them break. So there we have part 3, looking at it like this, with this angled thing here, not that way, but this way, bend the flanges down. If you're looking at the face with the 2 holes here and the 1 hole here in this orientation, the flanges all bend away from this face. It looks, I mean, you can easily make that mistake this way too, but orient it this way and bend them down. There we go, part number 3. Okay, I found a second mistake that I made. This was part number 2. It had 3 bends, 3 flanges. This one on the diagonal line here, I bent 90 degrees. That was a mistake. It's actually about roughly a 45 degree bend. So I'm just going to slip this on and reverse that back to about 45 degrees, and then we'll adjust it when we do the assembly. Okay, I want to start the assembly of the tin on the bench here, and again, this is the first time I've done this one too, so I'll probably stop and start a bunch of times. I'm starting with pieces number 2 and number 3. These are the parts that are going to go around the turbo bearing and separate the compressor turbine from the exhaust turbine. They fit together like this. This smaller piece, the bottom part, it's going to go under the turbo bearing, goes underneath or inside this. It's actually going to be a vertical piece on the combine. It's going to be like that. But this one goes on the inside of this bent up part number 2, and that's because the turbo compressor is right up against this face, and we can't get screws in from this side, but we may be able to get them in from the back side here. I'm not sure whether you'll be able to get both of these in, but I hope you'll be able to get at least the outer one in. I probably won't put all of the screws in as I do this because I don't want it to take all day for you, but you should probably run a screw in and out of every hole anyway. Okay, parts 2 and 3 together. Now I ended up cutting off just a little bit of this piece here. I'm not sure I would have had to because I'm putting this one on the inside now, but when I wrapped that one around, it didn't fit there, but now when I put it behind it, it probably didn't need to have that cut off. Anyway, parts 2 and 3 together. And let's take part number 15. That's this really triangular piece with this semicircular cutout here. And we should have screw holes that line up like this. And I'll put some screws in there. As you orient these, the holes that are cut by the laser are 2 different sizes. The pilot hole that we go through first is the large one. The screw won't really bite into that one, but it will go into the second one, and that's where it will bite. That tells you which piece goes on top. So I'm not going to put them all in right now, but that's part number 15 assembled to 2 and 3. The next one we can do is this other genuine puzzle here. This piece goes underneath part number 15. You got screw holes here, and again it'll tell you which one goes on top by the size of the hole. Remember the one piece that didn't have any bends? That's the one that ties this together on the outside here. So piece number 14. Alright, I got piece number, remember this space we put together to go around the turbo bearing here. We're going to start on I'm going to take this space that we just did and put that down on the bench. I'm going to take piece number 4, and he will lay on top of this. This is when you find out whether you got those bends right or not, and you just have to adjust them slightly. That's where they'll lay together. Okay, this piece lays on top of here. You'll notice that some of the holes are designed to have screws come from opposite sides here. And we've done that so that when you're on the combine, sometimes it's easier to put a long driver in and shoot one through here than it is to get behind and put one in, because it's very tight space behind here. So we've kind of left open some options there in the design, and then we'll see which works best when we do an assembly on the combine. Okay, that was piece number 4. Looks like it's designed to have at least one of these screws go in from the inside out. Don't really know whether that'll be possible on the combine or not, but we're going to try it. So piece number 4, it's actually going to go down behind the turbocharger. The compressor's here and the exhaust turbine's inside, and this is behind that near the block. Piece number 5 is going to piggyback onto 4. It's the same shape here, and so we simply slide it inside of the other one. Adjust the bends to match and shoot a couple screws through. These screws are shown as going in from behind. That means you're going to have to reach back in, probably with this little stubby screwdriver, get in behind here to spin those screws in from the back side, because it's kind of tight against the block in there. Next one I'm going to put on is part number 6. It's going to fit on the bottom. Well, I'm upside down here, so we're looking at the bottom from the top, or from as if we're underneath it. This is going to slide over top of here, and it will need to slide. I actually have a screw here that I'm going to have to take out. And it looks like this flange that I've got bent at 90 degrees should be a little less than that, because this face isn't 90 degrees. We're going to slide this inside over top of that flange. I'll put that screw back in. It looks like I missed a screw hole here, so that there's not one in the underlying piece. That's the benefit of these being self-drilling, self-tapping, is I can probably just shoot it in there. Maybe. Well, it took a little while, but I shot that one through there. It's little tab wants to bend, so that's the bottom piece. This is where your oil return from the turbo bearing is going to come through. This is where the pressure line goes up to serve the turbo bearing from the top. Okay, so I found another mistake that I made. This piece, number 8, is going to lay over, join these, and it should match these in terms of angles. And this large hole here should match up with this one. And those two overlap there, but now notice that I've got these bends the wrong direction. So I will reverse those. We've done it right. We should be able to overlap here. And put screws through there. Now I also notice here that I've got 2 screw holes missing in this piece. I hope you get that fixed for your version of this, but I will shoot screws through from the inside to the outside on those. Inside of the enclosure to the outside. Okay, that's piece number 8 after I reverse the bends and hopefully put it on in the right spot now. Piece number 9 lays inside, fills in the rest of this, the bottom of the box. I'm going to tip it up on end to put the screws in. Okay, that was piece number 9, the bottom of the enclosure. You notice that there's a gap in here. That's where your, I call it the choke after the turbocharger sits in there. And we have to go around that. Piece number 10 is the end. Sits in here. Goes inside the other parts and the screws go in from the outside. Don't put this one in the bottom. Don't put this one in the bottom here. We'll catch it when we put the outside panel on. Piece number 11, I had to adjust the bend and increase it a little on this flange on the bottom, and it will wrap around here and cut, I think. Right, I found another mistake that I made. Again, the first time folding this, it's pretty easy to, not making excuses, but it's pretty easy to fold a flange the wrong way. This is part number 11, and these flanges on this side that there's one that tapers and then the one that's 1-inch flange, and I bent them, in this case, up or perhaps down, but I bent them the wrong direction. And so I'm going to undo that and bend these instead in, I believe it is 90 degrees. A little more. So 90-degree bends on those. This one does bend out, but not, I had it bent 90 degrees, but it's less than that. That's gonna, doesn't have any holes in it. That's going up against your diesel oxidation catalyst can to seal up there. So part number 11 should look like that, with this little notch in here on this side, and those flanges bent down 90, and this one without any holes bent up about, something like that, 30, 40 degrees for now. And there's no bend down here where these holes are. Those holes should now line up with those in the bottom of this piece and tie this together. Once we get that one on, it leaves room for this piece. Looks like it could stand to have some more holes here. I'll try and add those to the production parts. I'm going to take part number 16, that's the top, lay it on top here. These little tabs go down inside. Now we can take piece number 1. Slip it in here. Okay, I'm missing a tab here, this one that we accidentally had the laser cut off. Your kit should have a tab here to screw that corner together as well. And so that's I haven't put all the screws in, but that's the assembled enclosure that will box in the remaining hot parts of your exhaust system so that we can pump clean filtered air into that box and keep it from being an ignition hazard for your dust. You may look at the enclosure and say, well, that looks pretty leaky, and it does need to leak some air from the inside to the outside, but we also can cover these seams and gaps and stuff in places where we've got little gaps with some of that aluminum foil tape that I'll provide you with the kit. So this is the first iteration of the tin for a 8250 2022 model year. Now I have to take it to a machine and fit it on there and make sure that it does fit on the machine and make any adjustments. But I don't imagine that the adjustments are going to be any sufficient to change what we just talked about here. So that's how you bend up the tin and do the bench assembly for the tin kit for 8250, and then there'll be another video to show us how we install the individual pieces on the combine itself. So that's the bench assembly of the tin. I always put this disclaimer at the end of every video, but the Firestop kit is very good at preventing the ignition of volatile dust at the exhaust system on your combine. And in doing so, it will stop the chronic fires that you experience in volatile crops like sunflowers, canola, safflower, some peas, some lentils, and other crops. However, I can't guarantee that you're never going to have a fire on your combine. You can have a fire from an alternator that's throwing sparks, from a bearing that gets hot, from friction where material gets built up around a shaft or something. There's just many things that can cause a fire. But this should stop the chronic fires for you. That's its intent. So continue to be careful. We hope you have a safe harvest. And then go ahead for the next video to look at how the tin fits on the combine itself.